dia. O propósito deste seminário é agradecer ao Governador do Presidente do Instituto Superior de Agronomia e do Prof. Guerreiro também a oportunidade que foi dada à Estrutura de Missão para ter acesso a este público tão educado na matéria dos incêndios e tão especializado. É para nós uma oportunidade boa para também conseguirmos deixar a semente que a África do Sul traz e que a Amanda traz dos Estados Unidos na perspectiva da meteorologia, num terreno fértil em que as ideias certamente vão ser criticadas, certamente vão ser absorvidas e vão contribuir para que o vosso saber seja mais e melhor. Eu acho que esta mensagem é muito séria e dura, mas Portugal tem que reconhecer que tem debilidades estruturais nas instituições do Estado e a mim surpreende-me que não esteja aqui gente do ICNF que tem nos próximos meses, nos próximos anos, a grande e nobre tarefa de recuperar o prestígio, a capacidade e a liderança para que os fogos rurais não sejam aquilo que têm sido. Trevor, o Carl e o Adrian estiveram durante um mês, assim como esteve a Amanda junto do IPMA, mas eles estiveram espalhados em vários sítios do país, prontos a ajudar a combater algum incêndio, mas durante esse percurso visitaram a FEB, visitaram os JIPs, visitaram corpos de bombeiros, visitaram instalações do ICNF, visitaram o programa de sapadores e absorveram aquilo que nós temos de bom, mas também conseguem criticar e dar propostas para melhorias que nós temos que fazer. A situação em Portugal é ainda muito vulnerável e vai ser durante muitos anos, enquanto a paisagem estiver as cargas de combustível que tem. Eles, sul-africanos, têm a vantagem de ter grandes herbívoros e um uso do fogo muito intenso e muito bem estruturado que permite reduzir a incidência do fogo, não a incidência, mas a severidade com que o fogo ocorre. E a experiência que eles têm na gestão operacional do dispositivo de prevenção e combate a incêndios e de gestão integrada de fogo, é muito relevante. Eles tiveram contactos diversos com as instituições durante a sua estadia aqui, foi essa informação recebida de baixo para cima, é agora o sítio também de deixarem depositada aqui na escola o saber que trazem e também deixarem as pontes para que vocês mais tarde ou mais cedo, preferência mais cedo, possam visitar a África do Sul e também aprender com eles. O programa de intercâmbio que temos montado é um programa que arrancou em março deste ano, já contou com a presença de canadianos, espanhóis, sul-africanos outra vez, americanos, australianos e vamos continuar a avançar. Tiveram cá também 7 chilenos que foram embora esta semana e, portanto, todo este esforço internacional é para refortalecer as instituições portuguesas no saber fazer, mas também as instituições universitárias que são o depósito fidedigno e esperemos que perene do saber que eles trazem e que a nós nos faz falta. Queria agradecer na pessoa do Sr. Primeiro-Ministro a presença e o esforço que eles tiveram durante estes últimos meses, uma vez que é uma cultura diferente, é um ambiente diferente e tiveram que ultrapassar adversidades. Felizmente não foram envolvidos diretamente no incêndio, embora tivessem vindo essa capacidade e esse poder para o fazer, mas estiveram presentes em alguns eventos e eles vão-nos transmitir aquilo que experienciaram. Aspecto importante, eles estiveram presentes também em reuniões junto dos militares e foi possível também transferir conhecimento para essa instituição, junto da GNR também, e portanto é manter isto durante 2, 3 anos, aumentar a incidência da troca de conhecimento e garantir que uns vêm e que outros vão e que vocês, quem sabe, que estão aqui, podem também lá ir passar uma temporada à África do Sul a queimar e a fazer algum trabalho de civicultura.
Good morning, folks. I'm very sorry I cannot speak Portuguese. I could give this to you in Bahasa, but Bahasa wouldn't help very much, or Zulu, English, Afrikaans, but let's just stick with English. Thank you for the time available, and for the next hour we're going to tell you stories. We're going to tell you stories about all over the world for the very, very simple reason that fire is exactly the same everywhere in the world. And you think, well, how can that be? It's so different. The fire science is exactly the same all over the world. The people fighting the fire talk different, they got different languages, they got different accents, but the science does not change. So you might say, well, no, but the fuels change. We've got acacia longifolia and it's different. No, it's not. It is exactly the same. The Americans have the large, dense stands of natural pinus species, but it's different. No, it's not. And even the way that you fight a fire is also exactly the same. Because if we acknowledge that fire is a science, then we need to acknowledge and accept that fighting a fire is a science. And it's not just about fighting the fire, it's about preventing the fire. And it's about things that you're going to do, because actually you don't want unwanted fires. We have large-scale prescribed burning activities. We obviously come from a fire-adapted environment for millions of years, fires being part of it, and it's a little bit different here. Or is it? And that's what we're going to be going through. So we've got operations in Chile, we've got operations in Brazil, North America, Canada, Germany, Indonesia, Australia, and obviously Africa all the way through. And every single one of those things do not make us experts. No, no. It gives us more opportunity to make mistakes and to learn from them. And more opportunity to listen to other people's mistakes. Because one of my biggest passions is that we have not got time to learn our own mistakes. We haven't. Because a lot of the mistakes that we may learn may hurt somebody. Heaven forbid, kill somebody. Why do we have to relearn that mistake, especially if the global environment has doing exactly the same thing? They're also fighting fires, they've also got high fuel loads, they've also got all the joys that go with it, and they're hurting people. Why aren't we learning from it? And I make some foresters very upset when I say, I don't care if all your trees burn down, they'll grow again. I don't care if all your houses burn down. Don't worry, we can rebuild them again. No, we cannot replace a single person, civilian or firefighter, that is fighting that fire. Because even if you are a hero, you're still dead. So what is the point? And lessons learned across the globe are becoming a very, very critical factor. And especially this year. Because you can call it whatever you want. Global change, climate change. Give it all the names that you want. This year, the globe was burning at the same time, quite catastrophically, on a massive scale. Chile, South America, California, British Columbia, Montana, Sweden, Greece, Spain, Portugal, Australia, New Zealand, England, Scotland. Let's throw in a brand new one, Mongolia. Mongolia's got a major problem. The permafrost has melted, and it's burning, because it's peat. It's high latitude peat. Lots of biomass. What are we going to do? We are so unique. No, you're not. It's exactly the same all over the world. But before I get ahead of myself. Note to self. Integrated fire management solutions. Let's look at what it takes to fight this scientific beast that we have to acknowledge is the same all over the world. I really love working in Europe because language is a fascinating subject because the languages are so closely linked. After this tour, I'm going back to Indonesia. There are 7,000 words in Bahasa Indonesia, which has got Malaysian traces, which are directly linked to Dutch. I mean, how did that come across? I have no idea. It's the same all over the world. We look different. We sound different. It's the same. Nothing's really changed. We didn't invent an integrated fire management, not at all. It's been happening for hundreds, if not thousands of years, but in different pieces. All we've done is put it together in a relatively concise explanation of the complex pieces that go together that are so heavily interlinked that you cannot ignore one over the other. So if we just look at the pure Latin, integrate is a Latin word. Obviously, it means whole or complete. No single entity will be able to do fire prevention, suppression, maintenance, any of those on their own. Because there will come a day when you will not have enough. There will come a day when you need the people around you. Because fire is a very weird thing. It doesn't care about a line on a map. It doesn't know about a line on a map. It doesn't know about fences. It doesn't know about roads. It doesn't know about different languages or different people groups. It just goes and does what it does. If you don't do it together, watch what happens next. Because it is a verb past tense. It is not a reactionary stage. It is a preparatory. It must be prepared. And it's one of the biggest mistakes that the globe has made in various forms, is that everything is about reaction. Reaction, reaction, reaction. And you start, if you look at it at some sort of percentage, 80% reaction, put the fires out, put the fires out. But actually, we believe that it should be totally turned around. It should be 80% prevention in various forms, and we'll go through that. Because if you have an effective 80% prevention with a P, with planning, the reaction is going to be not a big factor at all. Because you would have had the systems in place that you want. You got the capacities, you got the people, you got the firewise communities, everything goes in, and then you just got the small suppression side. And believe me, you are not unique to be teetering on the 80% suppression and the 20% planning is still getting there. South Africa, we have some areas where we are up at about 65-70%, and some areas where it's totally the opposite way around again. It's not the same all over the world, but the principle should be. So we use a wheel. Now we use a wheel because of the structural strength of a wheel. It is only as structurally sound as its completeness. The circumference must be closed, because if it isn't, then you're going to have structural integrity issues. And we use colors because we've got a fire danger rating, just like yours. And we've actually got 5 colors. It goes blue, green, yellow, orange, and red. And we just use the yellow outside ring, orange, red, and then green. And they are made up of 4 different factors. Now, you would have also have heard of prevention and protection and suppression. We do a lot of work with the UN, and they, about 15 years ago, started bringing in the R's. It was the 4 R's, first of all, and it's actually now the 5 R's. So reduction is your prevention, readiness is your protection, and your suppression is the response factor. We're actually going to put in another R in this one, and it's called research, and I'll just throw it up basically. Because research is often about lessons learned and what are you going to do about it. Because too many times we've had historical things happen, and we've got some of the best scientists in the world sitting just north of Coimbra. Are we listening to them? Are we using them? Are we taking their lessons and are we putting it forward, and are we making a difference to stop this whole cycle going through and through? There is integrated fire management. So what is it? We start off with the legislation pie. So the guys call this the pizza, some of them call the motorbike wheel or the bicycle wheel, the wheel. Let's call them pies. The first piece of the pie is legislation. And this is often where people look down and they say, oh no, not another one. Because legislation is a tricky thing. So where does legislation come from? Let's give some examples. Motor vehicles were driving on the roads all over the world for 27 years before the first legislation came in to say, listen, when you go to town, please slow down a little bit, because the horses were getting run over and this wasn't working out so good. It took another 30 years before they decided that, listen, it actually isn't the cars that needs to be legislated, it's the drivers. Please, let's get some licenses in this. So let's call it 60 years. 60 years, a state of flux was happening, and then they needed to fix something. So to fix something, we write laws. And it's not unusual. South Africa, we had 19 different pieces of legislation that mentioned wildfire in various guises. Those 19 became one, because those 19 were so confusing and often diabolically opposite. They were telling each other that they can do things that the other one can't, and we had to put it together. Indonesia, right now we're working there with 27 different legislations that talk about wildfire. You can't really manage legislation when there are that many pieces of it. Bring it up into one. Little things like legislation involving the landowner responsibility. We've got a very simple wildfire act with a whole bunch of South African pieces in it, but one of the strengths of ours is that we have a large landowner stroke land user responsibility. For example, all of our landowners, every landowner on whose land a fire may start, spread to or from, a bit of legalese, must have ... fire breaks as in defensible space, must have trained personnel to fight fires on his or her land, or somebody there if he's not there, as in non-tenant landowners. We also have non-tenant landowner issues, where it's not my problem, I don't live there, the government must come put it out. It doesn't work like it, because what if the government can't put it out? We must have fire breaks. A fire break must be long enough and wide enough to reasonably stop the spread of fire across it. I think, well, how can you say long enough and wide enough? That's a little bit of an oxymoron. Well, long enough because it has to be contiguous. It has to be, there can't be gaps in it. Wide enough. How wide is wide enough? I've seen fires spot 5 to 7,000 meters, as in straight ahead, 7,000 meters. You cannot have a fuel break of 7,000 meters unless you've got a really big river. So how wide should it be? There is a science that goes in it. And to fix that, we've got a very simple clause where me as a landowner and Carl as my neighbor, we must get together and we must decide how wide we're going to make our fire break on our common boundary. Because now you've now got two heads instead of one, which is always better, and you're now sharing responsibility because you're both doing it together. Then it goes even further and it says that when I make my fire break, Carl must be there. Once again, if Carl is there and he doesn't like what's happening, it's his moral responsibility to say, Trev, yeah, this is a bit of a bad one. So it doesn't have to be overly complex to fix it, but there has to be accountability somewhere. And that accountability is often driven by a legislative you must, you shall, not you can or may, because some of those things don't seem to work. Inside our legislation, we have things called fire protection associations. And it's those landowners, myself and Carl and Adrian and all of us, we've all got our own little farm, and we get together and we talk about integrated fire management issues. We decide when we want to have our fire season and what we're going to do about it. We've all got to have resources. Are we going to work together or are we going to work on our own? Like I said earlier, there will come a day where you will not have enough on your own. So best you be friends with your neighbor. How can you get hold of your neighbor? How do you phone him? Is it email? Where does he actually live? What has he got on his farm? Fire preparedness, and it's all planning. And all the fire protection associations did was not give us suppression power or suppression capacity. That was like an offshoot. It gave us planning capacity. So we can think about it before, plan it before, because there cannot be a surprise if you planned it before. And that's the biggest thing we had to get away from, was all these surprises. Oh, it's an emergency. It's not an emergency. Any firefighter, any first line reaction force sitting in this room, it is not an emergency. It's our job. It's what we do every single day. And it even goes as far as to say is that when we wake up in the morning and when we go to sleep, the entire day is planned. Yes, but you don't know if there's going to be a fire. Correct. But you plan for one. Because you have your equipment ready and you have your PPE ready and you have your water points ready. It's all planned. So how can it be a big surprise? Which makes it not an emergency. It's our job. But that has to be helped, has to be leveraged by some sort of writing. Because when you write things down, it's normally to fix something that is going wrong. And all over the world, lots of things are going wrong that need to be written down. So let's look at the next piece of our pie. Oh, it does a wiggle waggle. That's new. Education and awareness. Now this is one of those massively broad ones that I could speak about all day, but I'm not. Basically, this one focuses on communities. Now, all over the world, I go and I say, where do your fires come from? Oh, the communities. Oh, they burn us down. They make fires every day when they're not meant to, and they burn us down. So what do you do about it? No, we tell them it's bad. We tell them it's very bad. So what do you do? No, we go tell them. We go tell them it's bad. Why are they burning? I don't know. They aren't educated. I don't know. It's bad. So do you go and educate them? No, it's just bad. I can go on for hours. The trick is that a lot of the reasons of why they are burning is not for malicious intent or vindictive intent. It's for a reason. Why are they burning? And don't tell me because they cross with their neighbor. This is not true. Don't tell me that it's because kids are playing with fire. It's not true. And often, the reason why they are burning is where you need to educate. Because there'll be a reason. Let's take an example in Indonesia, and that is a fascinating place if you guys can ever get there. Get there fast before all the forests are gone. No, I didn't say that. It might need to be edited. Okay, the Dayak people are the indigenous people of Indonesia. They are tiny, little people, tough as nails and special people. And they burn the place down. They are the problem. Okay, cool. What are they doing? No, they're clearing the bracken fern, and they're clearing some of the secondary forest because the primary is all gone. And they're making these fires. And then the smoke happens, and then somebody else sees the smoke, and then they also make a fire, and then they also make a fire, and somehow it all gets down to this one guy that started the fire. But anyway, so I go and spend time with the people, and I try and find out why. Because they may not have the words, the scientific words, but things start coming together. For example, tropical deep heat has got an inherent pH of 3.5, which is very, very, very acid. Nothing can grow in there except the indigenous stuff, which needs to grow in water, needs to be flooded. So they need to grow stuff, they need to eat. I mean, you can't tell a man that he can't make a fire because his family's going to starve. I mean, that doesn't make sense. They have to burn the vegetation that is on the top of the peat, because guess what? Ash takes the pH up to 7.5. Not burning the peat, as in not going down, because that peat is precious, absolutely precious stuff. But just a light surface burn over the top, the fine fuels, not the heavy fuels, puts ash down, and guess what? They can plant a crop. The science is that you need 7 tons of lime per hectare to do exactly the same thing. So now you ask yourself, why they're burning? Oh no, they're bad. They're bad. No, they're not. They've been doing it for millions of years. Why are we not listening? And a lot of these community things are purely tapping the knowledge that is there already. Indigenous knowledge has been there for millions of years. Live with it, but listen to it, because there's a reason. And in the wild places, the reasons can be really wild, as in like scaring spirits away. But when you scare the spirits away, the crops grow better. Ha ha! Guess what? The spirits are a bit of a good excuse, but the ash is pretty good. Because 7.5, we can plant our cassava, we can plant our funny little maize things, and we can feed our families. So, community is not the problem. And anybody who ever says it, please just ask them to step back 1 second and say, community is the solution. Because if that is where the fires are coming from, without them, you will fail. And that's a very adversarial statement. But test me on this one. If you do not include them, you will fail. Because we are saying that the fires come from those people groups. There's a reason why they're burning. Educate on when. Because not all fires are bad. In fact, not at all. And one of the biggest problems that globally we have got right now is the total exclusion of fires. Exclusion of fires is as simple as this. Use fires as a tool, as it's been designed for millions of years, under the conditions of your choice, under the circumstances of your choice. Or nature will do it for you on the very, very worst day possible. And I can name hundreds of different examples. My daughter is in California au pairing right now. She had to be evacuated. Not because of the fire. Yeah, the fire was there. But guess what? There was just too much fuel. And with too much fuel, you can't fight the fire. That's the worst thing about it. The fire triangle. It's incredibly simple. It's 3 pieces. We got oxygen, we got heat, and we got fuel. There's only one piece of that triangle. There's only one piece of that science that humans can influence. Trust me, it's not oxygen, and it's not heat. It's the fuel. We can influence the fuel before 130 to 150 degrees, where rapid oxidization will occur in a class 1 fuel, class A fuel. And it'll be a self-contained oxidization. It's rusting rapidly. It will. I promise you it will. Fuel. We can change it. We can make a difference because we can recognize how fuel loading. And if we're just talking about pure education, we need to teach our kids, not just teach them the fire triangle, but teach them what it really means to real-world examples. So when they do see a fire burning, it's not, oh, danger, bad people making fires. It's, oh, how are they using that tool? Why are they using that tool? What is the end result coming out of it? So education awareness comes with different names. You've got FireWise, you've got Fire Smart, lots of different programs that are targeted purely on communities. And we like calling it community resilience. You make a community resilient against unwanted fires on the wrong day. It's all about timing. And it's going to do a wiggle waggle. I must push it twice. Fire breaks. Fire breaks are not meant to stop fires. Bit of a harsh statement, eh? They won't stop fires. They may stop a lateral moving fire, yes. They may stop a back burning fire, as in burning against the wind. But what it actually is a place to fight a fire from. It's a place to plan the fight of a fire from. That is a picture from Indonesia, and you might say, well, that is absolutely stunning fire break. It's actually a bit of a joke, because that brown stuff is peat, and it's 10 meters deep, and peat burns right the way through to the clay base where the ammonites are this big, and the soil is so salty and so acid that when you try to drink some, which I normally do, it feels like you're sucking a 9-volt battery. So that's not a good fire break, or is it? Because can I drive down there with difficulty, because it's quite soft and it bounces. But can I fight a fire from there? Oh yes, most certainly. Because on that break I can now dig. And I can dig down to the water, which is hopefully at about 1 meter, and I can pick up water. Now water is a good fire break, yes. Obviously that's highly unique. It's a place to fight a fire from. It's a place to defend your structure from defensible space. And we've seen lots of occasions in the last week or so where defensible space is critically minimal. And if a fire comes through in that area, you will lose your house. That sounds terrible, I know, but please don't try and stay and defend it, because you cannot defend it. There's nothing in between you and a fuel loading that is going to explode. Fire breaks. Wiggle, waggle. Wiggle, waggle twice. Fuel load management. Now this one here, this is a biggie. We said that we can only influence one piece of the fire triangle. One leg can be influenced. The fuel load that is in Portugal right now is catastrophic. And I promise you, I'm not saying big words to make you scared. All we're saying is that in some areas, if a fire gets into it, under the right conditions, stroke wrong conditions, you cannot physically fight it. Now you might say, well, let's bring in the 747. Trust me on this one. That's another story, totally. You cannot fight that fire. It is too hot. There is too much resilience, too much resonance. Prof Vegas, ask him all about resilience. The fuel is just too heavy to allow anybody to go into it. So you can say, well, that's easy. We'll come back to the road and we'll fight from the road. We've got lots of water. So we'll spray water everywhere and everything will be good. There will be too much fuel momentum to hold it on the road where you are. You are in a critically dangerous position, and you may get burnt over. Burnover is not a good thing, trust me. So now, a lot of areas that we've been speaking to have acknowledged that the fuel is too heavy. What do we do? That is a very, very good step. It's kind of like being an alcoholic. You have to acknowledge that you have a problem before you can start fixing it. And the fixing it is not simple. It's not as simple as us coming and saying, oh, we're going to burn it for you. Trust me, we're not. Because it's actually too dense to burn. In some cases, it is so dense that it will not burn under the conditions that we need. There's not enough fine fuels down below. It'll only burn in 100 k/h wind with 40 degrees. Now, that's not good. Well, we don't want that to happen. There are lots of different ways to go in there and to start making defensible space, and it's got to be done slowly. We eat elephants back home. If an elephant becomes rogue and it goes out, it gets shot, and the community eats it. They eat it in little pieces, tiny little pieces, and they eat it together. Every single community member takes a piece and they feed their family. You cannot eat an elephant on your own. You can't. It's not going to happen. But you've got to eat it fairly quickly, because otherwise it's going to go off. It's probably a really, really bad example. But you have to do it together. Drive around Centra, and you see all the different landowners, the little landowners, with some of the most amazing property on this planet and some of the heaviest fuel loads that we've seen for many, many, many years. It has to be managed, because if you don't, nature will manage it for you. And when nature manages it for you, trust me, you don't want to be there. You want to be somewhere very, very far away, and actually don't be there, because people die inside there. And it's not the first time that has happened all over the world. It's not worth it. And it's the one place where we can plan beforehand, slowly eating that elephant as we go. You have some violently fire-adapted species that are pioneers, incredibly strong pioneers. Yesterday, acacias love fire. They are made for fire. In fact, please give them fire, because then the seeds are going to regenerate. And they're going to leave a little bit of a surprise, and they're going to stay there for 20 years. And over 20 years, just give me another fire so I can regenerate, and then let me reseed again, and I'll start it all over again. And where you have any soil disturbance, where you're now going to plant an indigenous plant, and you scrabble around, and you come back in 4 months later, and the acacia is like hair, it's like grass in that square, perfectly squared, because the soil was disturbed. So what are you going to do? Because you don't want to disturb the soil, because then these horrible little plants come up. Maybe you do want to disturb the soil, to get them up so you can get rid of that. Maybe you do want to burn the area out under the right conditions, to get a flush that looks like beautiful emerald lawn, so you can start the cycle of getting rid of the seed species. But maybe that species is now endemic. Maybe it's meant to be here. If it's meant to be here, manage the fuel. Otherwise, nature will do it for you on a bad day. Risk profile. You have to know what your risk is to be able to fix it. And risk profile comes with data as well. You have some excellent historical data. You've got thousands of years worth of archaeological stuff. Humans have been here forever. Brilliant. Find that profile, find what you need to fix, and then fix it. Because unfortunately, a lot of risk management profiles and fire risk management plans are beautifully thick documents written by incredibly clever people. And they make brilliant sense. They are stunning. You can get a PhD off them. And they go onto someone's shelf. And that's where they sit. And then when something goes wrong, oh, was that in the risk profile? Please go and check. Yes, it was in there. Okay, we need to then focus on that again. Am I being facetious, or have you ever heard that before? Because I can tell you, I've heard it before. I've done it before. One of the lessons that I learned, where a risk profile is not operational reality. It's just a very good idea, because it gets your insurance tick button, or your FSC, or your NOSA, or your ISO 14025. It's all is good. We are good. It has to be alive. It's got to be an alive document. It cannot just be written by the students, which often happens as well. And it just sits and does nothing. Because if you don't do anything about it, it's actually worse than not knowing anything. Rather be totally ignorant and say, I've got no idea. This fire thing is not my game. I don't know. Because if you know about it, do something about it. Still into readiness, training. Now training, you guys have some incredibly effective and brilliant training. You've got some of the best schools we've ever seen. The trick with training is that it also has to reflect operational reality. And you can train somebody to the perfect firefighter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as many levels as you need. If they are not doing it on the ground, they're probably not doing it for a reason. That reason is it coming back into the training, and not to be trained with a big stick and say, you're bad, bad, bad. I told you, you must do it like that. But guys, there's operational reality out there that we cannot move into this compartment, which means we cannot do containment lines. Now you have to have an anchor on any firefighting. One of the most basic principles is anchor point. An anchor point is where the fire can't creep over. It may spot, but it can't creep or slop over. Maybe, for example, we've seen firefighting operations where containment lines are not done. They might be done with a big bulldozer straight down the slope, but the firefighters aren't going in there. Are they not going in there because it's too much like hard work? It could be that they cannot. Because actually, you try cutting a containment line in acacia longifolia when the trees are like this. How are you going to cut anything without either heavy machinery or specialized soil teams? Because you can't just chop trees over. It doesn't quite work like that. Those trees have got to go somewhere. That fuel's got to go somewhere. That's what we're talking about training. And it's not just firefighters, it's training of landowners. It's training of drivers. Please, please, please train your drivers. Drivers are getting hurt all over the world because they are driving fire crews that have got fire knowledge and fire science, but maybe they haven't, or maybe they aren't focused on because they don't have to do all the fitness because they're a little bit heavier. But don't worry, they're only driving a truck. Trust me, on a fire, I don't want to drive a truck. I get desperately scared because you've got this big lumbering thing that need to turn around. Because unless you've got turning circles, you've got a whole bunch of reversing to do. Has he been trained how to do high-speed reversing in the smoke while their firefighter's still trying to climb on and not drive over your friend who's actually trying to run away? Picture the scenario. It's everything and everybody that's involved with that fire operation. And a lot of that training should also be preparedness training. As in landowners, you need fire breaks. What do they look like? What do they smell like? What do they taste like? Train them. Because if they don't know, if the community doesn't know, surely training will help them with that. And that's the first time I've now started bringing back all the other things that are coming into it. Every single piece of the pie, and we're only at 45%, links to the next one. And links to the other one way, way, way before. Because legislation should be also in training. There have to be rules. There have to be, everybody should be trained the same. You can't have a different language or different terms. Because if I say, Carl, go to the left flank, and he doesn't know what left flank means, then I'm going to get him hurt, because he might go to the head. One set of rules in training and standards. Detection. After fire prevention, detection is the next most critical piece of the puzzle. And here I need my props. Let me just find the props. For the fairly simple reason is 99.9% of all fires start like this. Okay. How soon do you want to get to this ignition point after it started? Do you want to get there in half an hour? Do you want to get there in an hour, 90 minutes? Because unfortunately that is the start of a rapid oxidization process that is self-contained and it will grow exponentially. All depends what fuel it's in is how fast it's going to grow. But I would much rather get to a fire when it's that big than the size of this room. Because when it gets to the size of this room, suddenly I need some people to give me a hand. I need some resources to give me a hand. And things get a little bit more tricky when it's the size of this whole university. And it just steadily gets worse. So detection is absolutely critical. And that picture is of a fire detection camera. We use cameras all over the place and we find them very, very effective. You've got a very effective manned lookout system where you've got people with their eyeballs. There's nothing better than a human sitting in a tower looking for fires if he or she is awake. And that's why we went to cameras. Because we had a problem with the awake part. Cameras are very clever. They can help very much with being accurate. But the bottom line is, after that fire has started, how soon do you want to see it? And then what do you want to do about it? Because initial attack is everything about getting there as fast as humanly possible. And in the medical field, we have a thing called the golden hour. Fire is very, very, very close. But that needs to be variable, because on a really, really bad day, you have not got an hour. You've got 10, 15 minutes until it gets fuel momentum, fire momentum, and then you can't stop the thing. It's really important. So that detection comes with what we call initial attack staging areas, where if you know you've now done your risk profile, and you know that one of our communities, they have fires that magically appear, surely it would make sense to take those resources that you've now trained really, really well, and to use that detection system to find the fires really small, and have the people as close to that area as you possibly can. Because you know they're there, you've got a risk profile, and it all starts coming together. Initial attack staging areas we use a lot, we really, really do. And we use the aircraft exactly like you do. 10 minutes, the aircraft's got to be airborne. On a really bad day, it's 6 minutes. And because the aircraft can go in a dead straight line at 250 kilometers plus, and more than anything else, they can communicate to the ground of what the fire is doing. Because initial attack is not just about the first resource on the scene. It is about the planning for the extended attack. And you don't need to wait for a full operational cycle to know that I'm going to be here for the next 2 days. You can tell within seconds, absolute seconds. Because you know what the weather's doing, you know what the fuel is, you know where this fire's going, you know what direction the thing's going in. You can start planning already. Once again, it's not an emergency. It's not a big surprise when this fire gets big. It may be a surprise what we're going to do about it, yes. That doesn't have to be. We've planned it all the way through. Detection can also and should also involve communities. We have large areas all over the world where there are no detection towers. There are no detection systems. There's no dispatch and coordination. How simple is it? Is that if the fire is going to come from that community detects it, because they probably will. What are they going to do about it? Are they going to sit there and watch it? Or is there a system of flags? For example, Lesotho, they've got flags that they fly for fire danger index, as in fire danger weather. When the forecast is high, everybody flies red flags on their houses. I mean, how cool is that? You don't need FDR broadcasts and DEFCON 1 warnings on the radio. There is no radio. There are no cell phones. There's none of that stuff. Fly a flag. How about a black flag? When one community sees a fire, they fly a black flag. And the community very, very quickly talks down and literally shouts down. And where is the fire? Where is it going? What are you guys doing about it? It doesn't have to be complex. In fact, often complex is bad, bad, bad. Often you've got to step back and take a deep breath and go back to basics. The basics of communication with people. The basics of people dynamics and planning. It doesn't cost anything. In fact, it's absolutely for free, but it's priceless. Totally priceless. Our next one is systems. Systems include management systems. We've often been to events where there are so many people that you are tripping over each other. And fighting a fire is incredibly easy. Literally, I could take you outside and in 10 minutes, I could give you the basics that could keep yourself safe, and I could teach you how to fight a fire. Not a raging inferno, but easy, not a major problem. The trick is managing you thereafter. That's going to be another whole different ballgame. Because the girls are going to want to go on the flat land, and the guys are going to want to go climb down the cliffs, and being a little bit facetious. Management of the firefighting resources is sometimes more important and more critical than the firefighting resources themselves. You can have a scenario where you have too many. You have an overload, and we call it resource overload, where everybody wants to help, but everybody's getting in each other's way. You start blocking roads, you start taking away water resources from that community, and it starts getting chaotic. So there has to be a system of dispatch and coordination that says, don't just go to the fire, I will send you to the fire. The system would include, when you get to the fire, you are going to speak to the operations section chief. And the operations section chief at the staging area, which is another big word, but we'll teach you about that, he will tell you what to do. Because please don't just go anywhere, because you're going to get in the way and you're going to get yourself hurt. That system must be the same for everybody. Because like I said earlier, a fire does not care about a line on the map. In fact, it loves lines on the map. Because that's where it's really going to pick up momentum and go into the next line. And then the next line and the next line. Until somebody takes away the lines and fights the fire under one set of rules. SOPs, standard operating procedures, BOPs, best operating procedures. They've got lots of names all over the world. The most important thing about them is that they are often written in blood. That sounds very, very reactive, but I promise you it's true. Because when something goes wrong, what do? You change your procedures, don't you? You write a new one. In fact, even better, you write two more. Because there was a really, really serious thing that went wrong. So you put those 2 new pages into that lovely document that's sitting on your desk. But even better, you don't tell anybody else about it. You just keep it to yourselves. Because it was our accident, and we're feeling a little bit embarrassed, and no, we don't want to let the neighbors know about this. That was really, really bad, because we made a mistake. I have made hundreds of mistakes, and I hope to make lots more, because that's the best way I learn. Maybe I'm a bit stupid that way. But my mistakes, make no doubt about it, I'm going to tell you about them in detail, in technicolor detail. I'll draw you pictures, and I'll show you photographs. Because please don't do it again. Don't make the same mistake I did. And here is my SOP or BOP that we wrote together because we cannot afford to have this happen again. And please give it to everybody that you know. Tell everybody. Put it in every single paper you can think of. Because it cannot happen again. How simple would that be? How effective would that be if we learned from our mistakes? Put them into new procedures. Yes, it must be written down, otherwise it doesn't exist. How simple would it be? How often does it happen? And that was a rhetorical question. Please don't answer. One of the things that is in there is the incident command system. We use the ICS. We only learned it fairly recently, 2003, and it was one way that we could fix our silos. I'm not sure what you would call it in Portugal, because I'm sure you haven't got it. But a silo is, I look after me and mine. Cole does exactly the same. And we talk to each other because we're friends, but I'm the boss over here. I'm the boss. Cole's the boss over there. Now the fire gets to that line that it loves so much and it just goes straight over. And now I'm not the boss anymore, but now Cole's the boss. But actually, Adrian, he's also the boss because he's got a different agency and the other boss is now going to take over. And you start getting that challenge with the guys going uphill and the girls going downhill, and the managing of the resources suddenly becomes impossible, and this fire's not going out, and we don't know why. It's because we got silos. And it's not unusual, trust me. Even one of the most mature incident command systems in the entire world, Canada, America, they still have exactly the same thing. But it was a system that was designed to take away ranked structures and leave you with experienced structures. To take away positional power and leave you with operational reality. Power is not part of the deal. This is not a competition. Trust me, fire has enough of its own competition all by itself. It doesn't care. In fact, it thrives on chaos. Because the more chaos, the bigger it's going to get. Quickly, too. And then when you just get your chaos sorted out, the wind changes and it rains. You say, oh, we put the fire out. All fires go out eventually. Trust me. Sometimes with nothing to do with us. We were just there for the ride. We were just there to cause more chaos for ourselves and to have this massive emergency that probably didn't have to be if we had systems, and management especially is one of them. And the incident command system is a very, very simple process of scalability and people doing what they have to do, but only what they have to do. We have scenarios where we have everybody doing everything, but nobody doing anything. And fires love that. Oh, trust me, they love that. They really, really enjoy it. Because it just gets that chaos moving and gets those sirens even louder. Deep breath. Management of the people is sometimes more important than the resources that you have available. And it goes right from the ground all the way, and especially to aircraft. I hate to tell you this because it pains me desperately to say it. But aircraft don't put out fires. They don't. They are a very, very effective tool to assist the ground to put out fires. Because aircraft, let's go back to some science. Let's do another quick science lesson. 3 legs of this little triangle. You've got oxygen. Can aircraft take away oxygen? No, they can't. And foam, by the way, does not take away oxygen. It makes everything look nice and white over the top, but there's a whole bunch of oxygen underneath. It does not take it away. And the only way to take away the oxygen is to totally smother it with a flapper or a kapjok or whatever it's called here, or sand. Sand is a brilliant smotherer. It's actually the best firefighting medium that you have. Can aircraft take away fuel? They've got a very, very clever stuff called LTR, long-term retardant, the pink stuff. You see in all the movies, and there's some blue stuff as well. And it's very smart. It is ammonium nitrate with ammonium sulfate, and actually it's fertilizer. And the only reason why it is red is that so that the guys can see where it went, so they can tag onto it. And the only reason why it has water is to carry the ammonium nitrate. Ammonium nitrate's very, very clever. At 130 to 150 degrees, it outgasses CO2, carbon dioxide, and H2O. Water vapor. Pretty damn cool. You think, well, that's it. We've solved the problem. We've coated all this fuel with the red stuff. It's going to outgas CO2 and water. It's going to change the fuel. The problem is, it doesn't change all the fuel. It changes some of the fuel. And you have a thing called shadowing, where the aircraft load comes in at about 120 knots or so, and it's 12,000 liters, and you think, wow, that is so cool. And it is. It is amazingly cool. But every single tree has got 1 quarter of it that has got no LTR on it, because it has some forward movement. So you say, well, let's go a little bit higher, and then that fluid must reach terminal velocity and fall straight down. Excellent, good idea. Let's change the fuel. That fluid does not coat all the fuel. It still leaves the underneath, and it just punks along underneath. All LTR does is give you time. So now, if aircraft can't influence the fuel, and it can't influence the O2, oxygen, all we can do is influence the heat. But here's the trick, we can't take away the heat either. We can influence it, as in we can bring it down. But with any fuel above the size of my thumb, that water is going to make very little difference in about 5 minutes, give or take. Because there's enough residence heat in that fuel to dry it out, and it burns again. So, oh dear, this is getting really sad. That is why aircraft have got to work with ground crews, and that comes in with your systems. Because those SOPs cannot say, aircraft, you do your own thing, because you are very special and you're dropping millions of liters of water, and you're going to be our magic wand. Cannot. Because it's not true. It's not, there's no scientific base to it. And it's one of the fundamentals that has to be realized. I fly those machines. So I would love to tell you that I can fix all your problems. Give me 100 million euros and I'll fix everything. I can't. Aircraft can't. But the ground teams can. Working closely together, direct attack. Where the teams are right on the fire line with the ultimate fire tanker, coming in every 7 minutes with a fixed wing and every 3 minutes with a rotary. And yes, those are the figures that should be coming. Then you can make a difference, because you can move very, very quickly. But it's systems. Because if everybody isn't trained to think like that and to do that, then it's not going to work. You're going to have one agency that's going to know exactly what's going on, and all the rest of them not. And they can watch in the air show and say, don't worry, aircraft are here. Everything's cool now. Everything's good. And actually the aircraft are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So that makes it even better. It doesn't. It doesn't. All aircraft do is give you time. It does give you time. Last one in the orange is capacity. Now we've already brought it in. We talked about aeroplanes, we talked about people, we've talked about different capacity, from heli attack to fast reaction to rappel attack. It doesn't matter what it is. You know what it is. You train them to what standards you need. You give them one set of systems. Please, 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 if nothing else, have one set of systems. Do not have different agencies working on different pages of the music book, because it sounds terrible when everybody's playing on the wrong page. It doesn't work either. It's the same beast that is being fought. It's exactly the same outcome that you want, with different toys in the toy box. And we love toys. Boys and toys, it's a thing. Give me all the toys, but just let them all do the same thing for the same outcome, the same given purpose. Capacity, people, infrastructure, resources, trucks, aircraft, cool 4x4s, cool tracked vehicles, water points, everything that comes in to help with the next section, which is obviously suppression. Resource response. Now, you've now done everything. You've gone from the yellow, you've gone all the way through the orange, and now you're getting to a point where you've got all these toys in this toy box, and now you need to do something with them. So, a fire is detected, and it goes somewhere. That story goes somewhere. That somewhere decides what, who, how, when, and where those resources need to go to. And it is a critical piece, and it's probably the most important glue to any suppression operations. Because if you haven't got a dispatch and coordination, being the operative word, system You're going to have thousands of resources, all responding to the fire with all the best intentions. Believe me, I mean, they are doing a fine job. But they're going to get there and the chaos is going to kick in. The fire's going to say, thank you very much, I'll take it from here. It has to be a coordinated event. If it's not a coordinated event, it is incredibly dangerous. I've lost too many friends in this game to underplay this one. Please, please, please. The first thing that coordination and dispatch does is safety. It's the first time that I've now said it. I could have mentioned safety all the way around, but they are there to keep the resources safe. And they are a very, very powerful resource with aircraft flight following, because they can see them, they've got time, they can make notes, they have got a good situational awareness, they are designed for that. Dispatch and coordination are going to get the right people to the right place at the right time to enable them to do their job. They know how to do the job. Firefighters are pretty good at that. All is good. Just get them to the right one. Especially when you guys have a very interesting scenario where you can have 400 fires in one day. Try and fight 400 fires in one day without sort of dispatch and coordination system, because you won't. It'll be physically impossible. Everybody has to know what resources are needed and when they're going to get there. Then we've got our suppression. This is the putting the wet stuff on the red stuff. I really must stop that thing doing that. Keeps on eating my mouse. Okay, suppression. And there's a lovely sexy picture there of 802. It's an 802 with gear, and it's dropping 3,300 liters of water with foam, and it's so damn cool. But it's not the only tool in the toolbox. And it is the smallest tool in the toolbox. It's the most expensive tool that can be very, very, very quickly inefficient and just cost you money. And very, very dangerous. That load comes out at 120 knots, give or take it's 1.8, let's just call it 200 kilometers an hour. If it's too low, it'll break trees. If it's too low and you are under the trees that it's just broken, it'll kill you. We have had people killed by loads before. It's not a joke, it's not a toy. It's just a very, very powerful tool that the ground teams work with. And this is actually the easiest part of the entire wheel, because you've been planning for it. The whole year, you've been going through the yellow, you've been going through the orange, and you've even got dispatch and coordination, and now, bang, there's a fire. But dispatch is there, it's okay. Initial attack is there, it's okay. Now we fight the fire. And it's made up of your initial attack, it's made up of your extended attack, and everything that goes with that. And that's where we use incident command system. Because incident command system has got 5 different boxes. You've got your command box, or your incident commander. The Australians call them incident controllers. And then you've got operations. Under operations, you've got aerial operations, and you've got ground operations. They're the guys with the dirty hands. They like getting smelly and dirty and sweaty, and that's what we do. Then you've got planning. And planning gets everything together and writes down a whole bunch of different documents. Yes, documents are important. And they plan the next operational period. The reactive side is already happening. Coal's already fighting the fire. Don't worry about it. The aircraft are going, they're going wild. Everything is cool. What are we going to do tomorrow? Because what comes tomorrow is we're going to need some more crew. Because we can't have the guys here for the next 48 hours. They're going to get tired, and they're going to get crotchety, and they get snappy, and they get hungry, and then they get tired and they fall over. So we're going to need some more. And we need to feed them. Because there's nothing more sad than a hungry firefighter. Actually, there is one thing. It's a sick man. A hungry firefighter is terrible. You don't want it, because they will cry like babies, and you can get them to do nothing because they're hungry. Please feed them. Somebody needs to do that. Somebody needs to plan this little lot. Are they going to get KFC, or are they going to get Burger King, or is there a plan where there's actually ration packs, where they've got ration packs for the next 5 days, where they've got an operational cycle of 8 hours on, 12 hours off? I don't know, you tell me, because it's meant to be planned. Planning does that. And they have a thing called the Incident Action Plan, which is a whole bunch of documents that documents what we are planning to do. Because for the next operational cycle, they take that document They don't have to see me, they don't have to talk to me. All I do as I go out to go get some food, because I'm hungry and I'm grotty, all I do is give them the IOP and say, cheers, I'm going to go get some food. And he opens it up and he knows exactly what he has to do, because it's been planned. Wow, what happened to the emergency? It just doesn't matter anymore. You also have logistics. Logistics, people need to go to the loo. People need to have a shower. People need to sleep. They need some sort of structure. They need to be fed. Logistics does that. Medical unit, who's going to be doing that? Oh, plans will do that. Okay, everything is good. And then also finance. We have a finance sector, which is actually a really important piece, because who's going to pay for all that Burger King? If somebody's not going to pay for it, you're going to have very upset tenants at the local Burger King or KFC. It is a structure. It is very well planned. It's very well coordinated, because it doesn't have to be anything else but planned and coordinated. It is. Let the fire do its own thing. It will do it anyway. You can make it as easy or as hard as you want to do it, and it's totally up to you. That's where it comes in. So all the resources are managed and coordinated to be where they need to be at the right time, the right place. And eventually all fires go out, thank goodness. Otherwise none of us would ever do anything else but fight fires. And then we get into our green sector. And it's green, yes, because now the rains have come and winter is here and it's getting cold and the fires are done. What now? We don't all go home or go to the beach because the beach is too cold, but you can come to us because our beaches are warm then. This is where we work out the good, the bad, the ugly. And don't be scared of the ugly. In fact, embrace the ugly, because the ugly only gets pretty when you talk about it. And it only gets pretty when you process it. So the good stuff, guys, what do we do right this year? And we list it down. In fact, sometimes even leave that for after the ugly. But there has to be good. You have to reaffirm the positive, because remember, we're learning from this. We're learning from our mistakes, and mistakes are really good. It's okay. What are we going to do next time? How are we going to change the training? How are we going to change the community where this fire came from? How are we going to influence our fuel load management that we have now seen has been a major issue? How are we going to influence our systems? We're not talking the same language. How are we going to influence our dispatch and coordination, capacity? Everything comes back to exactly the same place. And this is where research must come. What happened with the fuel load? It's too heavy. We can't do anything about it. Prof Villegas, please come and help us. We need to get rid of this fuel. What are we going to do? You got some of the best scientific minds in the world. And I wish he was here because he really enjoys these sort of stories. These are right here. And he is linked across the entire planet, doing exactly the same thing, thinking the same way. We need to tap on them. Our academics have been, too often, they've been left in the cold because they don't know what they're talking about. They've got no operational experience, they've got soft hands, and they're really good with computers. We don't need to listen to them. Rubbish! They've got the brains and the time to work out what we're doing wrong and give us a science to it, to give it a name. They can show us scientifically, because then we'll probably believe them. Use them. They're here in this room, right here, right now. Rehabilitation. What are you going to do? Let's use a classic example of acacia longiflower. You're going to have this wildfire that's going to burn through there, and the entire mountain is gone. All your acacia is gone. Problem solved. Hello. For the next 20 years, you have not solved your problem just yet. But what's going to happen? You're going to get hair like on a dog's back. It's going to be green, beautifully green. Oh, it's so pretty. What are you going to do? Because that is not rehabilitation. But what you do hereafter is, if you want it to look like a hair on a dog's back, leave it exactly as it is. If you want the fuel loading to actually get worse than what you had before, leave it exactly as it is. If you want to fix something, do it. Make a decision. It doesn't have to involve glyphosate, but what are you going to do? Plan it. Because otherwise nature will do it for you anyway. Nature's not going to ask you what the plan is. It's got a plan. It's okay. It's quite happy. In 6 months you won't walk in there. And even better, the bracken fern will be just as high and the bramble will be there. Give me a year and you won't be able to walk in there at all. Don't worry, nature will do that. What are you going to do? This is where it has to come back to We're not going to do that again. This is why. This is how we're going to change it. And well done. We finally got our detection right. Brilliant. And you plan for the next summer. Because the next summer is coming. And the lessons that are learned out of rehabilitation, research, if it needs legislation, then do it. If legislation is the only way that you're going to change somebody's mindset, then do it. Try not. Because legislation is a bad enforcement tool. So many times it's just talk, and they call it NATO. No action or talk. Talk only. No disrespect to NATO at all. But then do something. Because you are still in the circle. You're still on the wheel. The wheel's still turning. The wheel's not going to stop. If you don't do integrated fire management, don't worry. It'll happen by itself. It'll carry on going. This wheel can't stop. Because fires don't stop. So do you want to be on the wheel, part of the wheel, influencing the pieces of the wheel, or do you want to watch the wheel go? And when the wheel goes by itself, nature is a nasty little girl. Nasty, nasty, nasty. She will teach you the same lessons that we've had over the last 50 years, again and again and again. And she will not care, because she's doing what she does. We are getting in the way, not nature. Nature's quite fun. It's happy. Does it make sense? In little pieces. The most important piece of it all is the next one that should come up. Community has got to be involved at all the levels. Disregard or ignore the communities at your own peril. Because if that is where the problem is, quote unquote, rather find the solution there, because otherwise the wheel will just carry on. Don't worry, it'll happen by itself. So you have the choice to influence it, for the good or the worse. Leave it alone, it's for the worse. For the good, you may not be able to do it all in 1 year. In fact, you won't be able to do it all. And there are pieces of all of these things that are happening right now, very effectively, in little pieces, and not together. If a fire break is not continuous, a fire will burn straight through the middle. It's exactly the same with integrated fire management. If our systems are not continuous, if the way that we work is not continuous, collaborative, all the big words, you know the ones, then it may not work either. Thank you very much.
Amanda is going to do here a more technical presentation, but at 3 o'clock at FLAD, which is sponsoring her traveling and all this time she spent here, Amanda will have a more debriefing presentation from the things she understood, how she understood, her vision about our problem and the opportunities for us to move forward, both in IPMA and both in ANTC.
All right, welcome everyone. I'm Amanda. For those of you who are in the previous talk, right, about fire management, we got to see the big picture and how if any parts of our big fire management circle aren't there, it's not going to work. So I'm going to be taking what we just heard about and how critical everything is and focusing on that red part of the circle, which is response and planning. And I'm coming in from thinking of fire management, and now we actually have a fire. And what do we know about our fire? And the idea that Trevor brought up, that fire is a science. And it behaves the same, and the science is the same across the globe. And my challenges and problems that I face in the United States are the same challenges and problems that are going on here. So I'm going to start off by going through some examples of things that I have run into of our challenges and what we get into. We will have a small section of technical stuff. This talk isn't very long, so if you're hungry, hold on. And so some small technical, but don't get too worried. But I'm a scientist, so I have to have a few charts and numbers. And then we'll kind of get into what we've been doing a little bit over the last month and what you can take away from this small presentation into all of your lives. So first of all, a little bit of background of who am I and why is this American here talking about fires. So my background is as a meteorologist. So for 15 years, I worked at our National Weather Service as a meteorologist. This is what I went to school for, research. I sat at a desk with lots of computers for many hours a day as a scientist. How many people here are scientists? Okay, lots, big group of scientists. So I am one, that's my disclaimer. In addition to that, part of my job as a meteorologist was to issue a weather forecast, just weather, that was going to fire users. And they were taking this weather forecast, just numbers, and they were applying it and making plans for their fire and assuming what was going to be happening. And there's a program in the United States that they say, well, if we're going to give fire, or we're going to give weather information to these fire users, maybe you should have one little online training about what a fire is, right? So I did this little online training about fire, and I said, oh, I really I can see my forecast being used. Well, this is a new thing. This is really exciting. I want to know more about how they're using my forecast. So I went into this program to get specially trained to be an incident meteorologist. And an incident meteorologist then is basically taking a science nerd out of their desk with all the computers and saying, we're going to teach you about fire, and then we're going to go put you in a fire, not literally, at fire camp, and you're going to gain all of this experience and knowledge about actually being there on the ground. And instead of handing over some numbers to the fire decision makers, I then became this interpreter of, here's a weather forecast, but now I'm here at the fire, and I see the fire, and I've watched what it's doing. They took me in a plane to see the whole thing, and now I understand. And I can say, here are my numbers, here's what your fire is going to do. Right? Now I fell in love with this. Okay. Then I have to go back to my desk, and I'm like, I'm not sure. I kind of like being out here. So I quit my job at the Weather Service with my desks, and I said, you know, I think I'm just going to go be a firefighter now. So I became a firefighter, so now I'm out doing the suppression. I really enjoy the prescribed burning, the planned fire, the controlled fire, the fire under our own terms. And I saw that I was a valuable resource only because when you're making a plan for a fire, how great is it to actually know how your fire will behave? Because it's just science. And a lot of that science comes from the weather going on, right? So I also decided, you know, I really like this fire thing, so I'm just going to join my local fire department as well. So I'm the short one in the photo. And so I also have the structure side of things, and a lot of free time. So this is all to just say that I wear many hats, and it's part of our culture of you have scientists, and you have people that love weather and numbers and speaking in weather forecasts. And then you have operational people who use this information and get dirty and are out there actually with the fire. But I don't know more than maybe 5 people all over that really have that background of meteorology and fire. Because we have to understand those are totally different personality types, right? And so I wear many hats, and it's not just that. This is a unique subset that just doesn't really exist. So in the previous talk, Trevor talked about the fire triangle, and this is the fire behavior triangle. So the fire triangle says, okay, I need 3 things for fire. I need heat, I need oxygen, and I need fuel. So I'm going to say, all right, we already have that. We have a fire. Now, how is that fire going to behave? Which is that critical piece, right? If you're going to make a plan to respond to this fire effectively, or you're going to make a plan for your prescribed burn so when we do it, it's in our terms, I need to know how it's going to behave. And this is just science. This is fire science. And the fire behavior triangle, again, is simple, and it says you need 3 things are really going to be driving your fire, and that's the fuels. Okay, I know what that is. And it's topography. Luckily for us, that doesn't change. And then there's weather. And weather is a scary one, right? Weather's changing. It's all the time. We don't know it. We can't forecast it. Oh, something went wrong. It was unexpected weather. Right, so it's this whole side of the triangle that we just say like, ooh, it's scary and this is something we have to live with. So the theme here is going to be that the part of the weather that is so critical is not that you become a meteorologist. And it's not that you take a meteorologist and say, now you have to learn everything about fire. It's that we recognize weather is very, it's variable constantly. It's going to be the one that catches us off guard. But it doesn't have to be if we know what we're looking for. We learn from the past, and we say, are we really getting the right message to the right people at the right time? And it's as simple as that. So, for all the scientists in the room, which include myself, right, this is how we give information. I know all of this data, I've been looking at models, I have charts and numbers, here's an index, here's another index, all these indexes together. Here you go. And the fire people, the fire personnel or operational who have to use this to say, what are my plans operationally for my fire, are the users of this information. And this is similar to what Trevor was saying, is you can actually be doing damage by having too many toys, right, in the sandbox. Just tell me what I need to know, the right message, at the right time. So this can basically be summed up as, rather than having this fire management circle that's all continuously working together and going around, in the fire behavior world, if behavior is the operational decisions of what's happening and how are we planning, we have these continuous bridges, and this is not a one-way street. These bridges all have to be built, and they have to be going back and forth, and if one of them implodes, it's not, your message will not get to the right people at the right time. And then that's when fires become tragedies. Okay, so let's talk a little bit actually about fire behavior. When I say fire behavior, this is fire science, but it sounds less scary if you just say fire behavior. But this is simply, where's my fire going to go and how fast is it going to get there? Because you have a fire and you have a community, and that community is very worried about how much time do we have, and you're making plans of what is most effective for taking care of this fire. So a little fire science. You don't have to be downloading all of the models and looking at tons and tons of data for the entire country. If I have a fire and I'm trying to plan how is this fire going to behave. The fire will behave based on the atmosphere that it's in to work with. Because remember, weather is a big part of that triangle. I know my fuels are at the surface, my topography is at the surface, but my fire, guess what? It's not at the surface. My fire is in this many thousand meter layer of the atmosphere. And until we conceptually understand and start recognizing that our fire is in this whole layer and it's not at the surface, we won't understand the fire behavior, and we continuously be caught off guard by weather changes. So when I am at a fire, as a meteorologist for these big and bad fires, I've been doing this about 8 years, where I just get a call and says we need you at this type 1 incident. This one is in California, and I'm literally standing here and I'm launching a weather balloon, and I launched it a few hours before this picture was taken, and so this is about the proximity to my fire. But I need to know, if I'm going to tell you what environment is my fire going to be tapping into and using today, I need to know, well, I need to know measurements. And although this is done by a weather balloon, and it's right there real time, we do have models that do this very well. Okay, so I can look at information. It will be a little smoothed out, but you can get good information even if you're not launching your own balloon. So when I launch this balloon, I get a weather map of my fire, but I don't care about the surface. I want to know vertically, so I get a vertical weather map, which looks like this. And this is what we call a tephogram or a sounding. Same thing. All right. So the value on the right-hand side is the temperature, and that's just my instrument that's saying I'm measuring the temperature as I go up. and this is the air mass that my fire is going to be experiencing, and this is my dew point over on the left-hand side, and so I can then see the vertical profile of temperature and dew point and wind is over on the right. Now I can see the atmosphere that my fire is going to have to behave in. And it's no longer this big mysterious part of my fire behavior triangle. I can take that in the morning and I can say, well, as soon as this happens, I know this will happen because that's a glorious part of science and physics. So, are people familiar with this all a little bit? The idea is that there's two different kinds of very specific weather forecast information for a point. So if I just want to know the forecast for my one location, I can get this idea, and these are all different weather elements in each different graph for a single point. And I'm going vertically on my y-axis there on the left. And the idea is at this point I'm going through time. So each dot is an hour ahead of time. And so as a meteorologist, and this is just to show you all the crazy numbers and that from here you're trying to tell. Everyone can see what their fire is going to do this afternoon from these graphs? Okay. Well, this is the weather forecast. If you're a fire operations right now and you request a weather forecast for your fire, this is what you get. So now you see the need for a translator, right, who actually understands the language and what you need. And I can look at this and I can tell you, not necessarily specifics, but I can tell you the message. What is critical that you need to know? You don't need to know all of this. I can tell you exactly what you need to know. But even better, this kind of gives me a snapshot in time. For the next few days, or the next 2 days, what's a critical point, a surprise, that if we know it's coming, it's not a surprise anymore, right? So what's that weather change you need to be aware of, because anyone on fire knows that that's when things go bad. What's a weather change I need to be aware of? When are the lines all moving? But even better, if I know the vertical profile of where my fire is going to be, I can then just use physics and I can tell you how much energy your fire has. I can tell you the wind direction of your entire column. I can tell you the probability of getting a plume-dominated fire. Right? I can tell you all this information by knowing the atmosphere that it's in. Okay, so let's talk about this big scary word, instability. Has everyone heard the term instability before? Some? Anyone who, oh, it's unstable today, it was really unstable, read fire reports. Oh, there's high instability. Oh, instability was not understood. Who knows what instability is? I have yet to run into anyone who even uses it themselves in a briefing, who can just interpret it into, well, what does that mean to my fire? And if you ask a meteorologist, they cannot do that without equations. So when we talk about instability, we know how critical it is for our fire. And it comes up all the time. It was huge instability. Why did it blow up? Huge instability. It's a really bad fire day. We have lots of instability. Well, if we don't understand what it means, it's completely lost. That is no message at all. So let's explain it. All of you will leave knowing exactly what we mean by instability. And when we talk about instability, it's really two things. The amount of instability, this magical value that a meteorologist says, our instability today is 12, and that happens. It is telling you two things. The instability is telling you, well, if I have an air parcel, which I'm going to call my hot air balloon, all the firefighters in the room can think of this air parcel as my smoke plume. I love my fire getting started. If I have an air parcel, my smoke plume, how high is it going to rise? Critical piece of information if you're trying to plan a response to this fire, right? Okay, so how high is my smoke plume going to rise? And also, how fast is that smoke plume going to rise? And this is a very easy concept if we just break it down, that it all comes to one very simple idea. Warm air rises. That's it. That's instability. Warm air rises. And the warmer the air, the faster it goes, and the higher it's going to reach. But we can't communicate that because we're not applying it to the users and that message that's really critical. So let's break it down even more, because we do need two pieces of information to know how unstable. Well, okay, I know that instability tells me how high and how fast, but I need to actually know these values. And luckily for us, we have physics and fluid dynamics, and we can calculate these things. So without getting into too much equations, the concept is if it's 18 degrees outside my airport, the temperature outside is 18 degrees, and the temperature inside my two hot air balloons, those are my air parcels, I'm going to raise the temperature of those two hot air balloons to 25 and 20. So without having a meteorology degree, who can tell me if I let go of these two hot air balloons, which one's going to rise faster? 25. So we know the concept. We've seen it out there. We've just never really understood why. And it's simply the amount of energy that's there. Energy in the atmosphere comes from the difference of temperature. You can have lots and lots of equations to make it more complex if you want, or you can just say warm air rises and the difference in temperature is energy. So my example to make this conceptual is the atmosphere is a fluid. It has all the properties of water, the ocean. Meteorology is fluid dynamics and physics. So if I have a bowl of water, or if I have an empty bowl and I have 2 cups of water and one is hot and one is cold and I pour them into the bowl, fluid dynamics tells us that what happens to the temperature in that bowl? It finds an equilibrium. It evens out, right? And that is what our Earth is constantly trying to do with the atmosphere, except instead of 1 cup of water of hot and cold, it's continuous. We have the sun shining, we have the poles, we're constantly adding heat and making it cooler. So we have this continuous bowl that's trying to always mix itself out, and that's energy, and that drives our weather. So, warm air rises. The bigger the difference of my balloon and outside, the more energy I have. Okay, so we can go one step further and say, okay, now I understand that if my fire is putting off, in my fire column, my smoke is warmer than the air outside of it, okay, it rises. Well, we see that all the time. I know that smoke rises. Now I know why. But let's go one step further and we'll say that now we have a fire. This is our point. Our smoke around our fire, our air parcel that we're heating up has reached 20 degrees. The outside temperature I'm measuring is 16 degrees. What's my smoke doing? It's going up. Okay, how high is it going? Oh, we don't know that yet. It's unstable. That tells me nothing. Every single day out there when the sun is shining and we're heating up air parcels at the ground, they're rising. We get thermals. If it rises high enough, those air parcels cool into clouds. If the sun is shining, with a few exceptions, it's an unstable day because warm air is rising. So how high is this smoke going to go? Well, I need to know one more piece of information, and I need to know what the temperature is aloft to know how high my balloon is going to make it. Luckily for me, I can either launch a weather balloon, and I can actually measure that, or I can go to a simple weather model if I know what I'm looking for. Very quick little web page, and I can say, well, what is my temperature profile outside? And is my smoke going to be warmer than outside because warm air rises? So I know that at this day, at 1,000 meters, which is a standard level, it's 11 degrees. I won't get into the equations, but as air rises, it expands and cools at a constant rate. It's called the dry adiabatic lapse rate. So very easily I can calculate, if I know the temperature at the surface, my air parcel will be this temperature when I reach 1,000 meters. It's just simple as that. So this is a conceptual concept. Obviously if we have fire going on, We're adding more heat as we go. But these are things that we can see are happening, and we know they happen, but we haven't understood why. We haven't understood that science piece before, because no one's really put it together for us. So I know that now, at 1,000 meters, my smoke plume is 11 degrees. I know the temperature outside is 11 degrees, so now what is my smoke doing? Is it rising anymore? No, so now it's just going at the wind. And luckily we know the wind at that level too, so I can tell you how high my smoke's going to go and exactly the way the wind direction will go. Which is not always at the surface, right? But what is your weather forecast for? The surface. Okay, so let's move on to a little of later in the afternoon. We're adding more fuels to our fire. Perhaps our fire's gotten bigger. It's a peak of the day. We see that usually happens. Temperature outside is also warmed. So our fire is hotter, the air outside is hotter. What is my column, or my smoke? Is now it rising faster than it was earlier? Do we understand why? A bigger temperature difference. Bigger temperature difference, more energy. More energy means it rises faster. Now in terms of fire behavior, if I have an area of atmosphere, smoke around my fire, and all of a sudden your smoke plume starts rising rapidly, or at least accelerates some, what happens at the surface? New, clear, fresh air has to come on in and fill in. So now you're feeding what was part of our fire triangle, oxygen. So now we've added oxygen to our fire. What's the heat just done? You've probably increased your heat. And so now we can see the consequence of just purely changing the temperature difference. Gives me energy, I accelerate, I add oxygen, I add fire. So we've seen this happen before, we haven't really understood why. But now, when I had my smoke plume and it was going at and it was cooling as it rises, and it finally met 1,000 meters and the same temperature as outside, but now it's a little warmer. And now instead of my smoke plume going to around 1,000 meters, now how high is my smoke plume? Higher. And I could tell you exactly how high if I had that information. But conceptually, what I know about my fire behaviors, as I add heat, I'm adding acceleration, I'm adding energy, and I'm going to have a higher smoke plume. And so again, if you've been on fires or you're planning for a prescribed fire, you plan on this occurring, even if you don't necessarily understand why. Okay, so this is really no new science. This is just the explanation of why we see this concept happening. Next comes the next step. Next comes that unexpected weather, the surprise. When I go to any fire, whether it's a prescribed fire or I get a call that there's a small wildfire, and, or if I'm heading out to some state in the U.S., and I've been to many of them, to be in a big fire, I'm all there for one purpose. My purpose is to make sure that fire does not have a weather surprise. That's it. Weather surprises mean articles and books get written about your fire and lessons learned that usually say there was a weather surprise or unexpected weather. And I would say it's not the weather surprise that results in the tragedy. It's saying there was a change in weather that we didn't understand what it meant for our fire behavior. So if that's my role, I keep seeing, again, what Trevor was saying earlier, the same surprise over and over and over, and recognizing that even if we tell you the change is coming, that's not good enough. Because if you don't understand what it means for your concept of what's going on, you're not going to plan for it, not going to be ready for it, everyone's caught by surprise. So the change I keep seeing happen over and over again that's in the forecast, but it's not clearly understood, is a cold front. And a cold front is simply the definition of a change of air mass. It's a sea breeze, it's a gust front, it's a cold front, whatever you want to say. You are taking the atmosphere, that entire layer that your fire is in, because it's not at the surface, you're taking that whole layer, and you're taking that outside air, and now you're changing the game. You're saying, I'm going to take that fire, and I'm going to put it in a totally different atmosphere. So what happens if all of a sudden in the afternoon, my fire is burning the exact same heat, the exact same intensity, we're going to say nothing has changed, fuels are the same, topography is the same, and I just changed one thing. The surface temperature, we've had a sea breeze go by, a cool front, a gust front, for whatever reason, all the same process. Temperature has now, the outside air mass temperature is now cooled from 24 down to 18. What can you say about the acceleration of your smoke column? Is this increased? So now it's happening at the surface, you're getting the fresh air, you're adding heat, you're adding more energy. We see the change in fire behavior now that was unexpected because we didn't understand it. So now, in addition, it's not at the surface. When you get an air mass change, it is not just, oh, we see a wind shift at the surface and the temperature went down. You might not even see a temperature change at the surface, right? Because as a meteorologist, I don't care about the surface. Weather's not at the surface. It's up a few thousand meters. And then whatever's up there affects the surface, but that's the afterthought. Where I'm looking for that weather surprise and my change in fire behavior is actually up here at this critical point, this 1,000 meters. Because all of a sudden I've added this energy near the surface, my smoke column has accelerated, I'm adding heat, I'm adding fuel. What's just happened at 1,000 meters? It's exploded. Right now, the amount of energy, when it reaches up there, my balloon is no longer 10 degrees difference, but now I've also added energy throughout the entire atmosphere. So by changing nothing else that we're looking for, by just changing the air mass around our fire, I've changed the game. Oh, and then by the way, remember most cold fronts come with what? Oh, a wind shift. That little piece of information that's usually in the forecast. I say that wind shift is a clue. That wind shift is telling you, I have an entire air mass change. You're going to change the whole game of your fire once that wind shift arrives. But we haven't really understood what the wind shift was telling us before. So you need to be ready for an entire air mass change. The instability, which is the amount of energy I have and how high my column's going to go, is going to change. And you can learn the tools to know how much. It's pretty easy. And so if I at least know there's a change coming, I'm not surprised by it. Can I do anything about it? Maybe not. Do I know the exact specifics? Maybe not. But I know something's changing, and my fire is not only going to have a significant change in behavior, it is going to have a wind shift and also change direction. And I don't have to have the details, but if I know those two critical elements, maybe there won't be a book written about the fatalities on your fire. So what's really going on here? This idea of common language and why I recognize this need of, you have meteorologists who know this stuff. Right? They study and study and study. There's equations. This is nothing new. I didn't discover this idea, right? And you have all these people who have this information, but it's just never really been applied to the fire world. And a cold front doesn't add explosive behavior to the atmosphere, so meteorologists don't really care about it. If there's no fire there, it's not threatening anyone. Maybe you get some thunderstorms. But if we can add this one layer of, again, here's my idea of my weather balloon. It's measuring the temperature. Warm air rises. So at the temperature, warm air is on the right-hand side. So as long as my temperature, I'm going to rise and rise near the surface. I know this is kind of techno. But I'm going to rise if I'm just an air parcel until all of a sudden I've reached a layer where the air is warmer above me. Warm air rises, can't rise anymore. This happens every day. We call it a mixing height, a mixing layer, an inversion. 18 different terms all mean the same thing. I'll throw in one more and call it your fire layer. My fire's not at the surface. Your fire is within this entire layer of the atmosphere. And you have to understand the temperatures throughout this whole layer and the wind throughout this whole layer if you're going to catch those surprises. The other idea of this is oftentimes get missed, and again we're surprised when you have this raging fire plume and column and then it comes down. What happens in thunderstorms? Every single updraft has what? A downdraft. Every single cloud is a little updraft that has a responding downdraft. The atmosphere is a fluid. If you have a cup of water at the bottom of a pool and you raise it up, what happens to the fluid around it? It's just fluid dynamics, and what goes up must come down. Sometimes more violently than others and in different ways, but there's lots of meteorology and studies about all of that. And the idea that in this mixed layer, any kind of weather you have, whether it's very, very dry air or wind shift or anything that's going on up anywhere in this layer, you need to be prepared for. And you can simply look at one chart and you can see what's in that layer, and then you can interpret that into this is what you can expect on your fire today. And everyone can do that. You don't need a meteorology degree. You need to find fire information. Okay, so here's just a little example of a case from, I don't know, like just 2 weeks ago? Yeah, just a little local case here, right? And during the workshop, our time here, and we had this fire, and nice little picture of it, brought it into the workshop. I said, well, let's pull up what our atmosphere looked like at that same time, and let's explain. We can easily explain the fire behavior we see with the profile of our atmosphere. Okay, and this is a whole course, like day course that I've been giving, so this is, we won't get into it. But the idea that it's as simple as warm air rises, and the temperature difference between my fire and my outside temperature is the energy. Okay, so now we're going to get into a case that changed my career. This is when I changed from a meteorologist into fire. And so this is 5 years ago now. I've been an incident meteorologist for a few years at this point. So I've been out at fires. I'm starting to learn. I've had a few years under my belt of gaining fire knowledge. By no means a fire expert. But all of a sudden we have this day in early spring in my hometown, and I live kind of right in smack middle between these two fires. And it just happened to be this day we had two fires. They started at the same time. They're in the same forests. They're close, about 2 kilometers apart from each other, relatively close together. They've experienced the same winter, the same spring. The indices are the same. Okay, so this is a case study of kind of two fires with two different mentalities. So leading up to this is May. We have similar seasons. We actually just had the snowiest April ever on record, so it's the winter that will not end. This is people are not thinking, ooh, we're going to have a great fire season, right? All the meetings are like, oh, it's going to be boring, we don't have anything to do. So 2 weeks before this event, we had a big snowfall came through, and the star is where the fire was on one of the fires. And so, sorry it's in inches, but it's basically a foot. A foot of snow, 2 weeks beforehand, right in this area. So there's snow in the ground. However, immediately after this, we had incredibly warm temperatures. So all the snow melted really fast. But what was our perception of the fire season? The coldest, longest winter. It just snowed 2 weeks ago. All right, so we are able to get rid of that snow, right? But no one's talking fire. So 2 weeks go by. This is a snowfall map. There's no snow left. It's been very warm for the last week. Record-breaking heat. So things are dried out. This is that critical time in the spring. We also have this phenomenon of the spring dip where there's about a 2-week window when the pine trees start regrowing their needles and they become explosively flammable, which is another ingredient. So I'm working at the National Weather Service. I still have my office with the desks and the 5 computers, and I'm there all night looking at weather data. And I see this coming because I'm a little bit more in tune to the fires world. And I start making calls 2 days ahead of time saying, wow, this is looking like a classic, right? Big fire danger day. So for me, I was talking on the phone and having briefings and conference calls with people in Minnesota. So we're in 2 different states here. The Green Valley fires in Minnesota, different structure. They use the interagency structure, the incident command structure. And then the other fire on the right is the German Road fire, and that's in Wisconsin. And in the United States, all the states kind of have their own governments, and they kind of do their own thing. There's a general overall, everyone does things this way, but this is like one end of the earth and the other. And in my job, I work with multi-states, so the forecast is the same, right? They've experienced the same thing, so I'm briefing them the same, and I'm saying it's going to be very, very warm. Humidity is below 20%, which for us is well below the very critical levels, and we've been seeing this for a few days. Confidence is extremely high. I'm saying there's going to be a cold front coming through the area with this wind shift. Our Haynes Index, which is a measure of instability that does not include any fire whatsoever. So without fire, the instability is very high. So from a weather meteorologist point and my communication of threat, this is a big fire day. We need to have fire warnings. Everyone has their red flags out. We need to be on alert. We're gonna have a big day. So I'm the scientist, right? All right. So on the other end of the conversation, on the other end of the phone, they're like, yeah, we hear you, Amanda, but you know what? All our indices are really low. Those values are not in the red. And they're saying, oh gosh, there is snow in the woods, under the trees. We're not even listening to you. There's no chance for a fire threat here. I was told there's no chance for a fire. So the risk perception, even though they're the same information, was one side of the state, mainly because, well, of course I work for that side, so I train them a lot and they hear from me. But it was this idea that you can have the same information, the same conditions, and come to very different conclusions, right or wrong. But this is one of our challenges. And so on the operational side, they have a scientist saying, here's all these numbers, and then you have, well, we're not going to have a fire. So this is the challenge. And so what happened this day is about middle of the afternoon, we had a fire start in Minnesota. The conditions, it was a very cold air mass that came in. So any of this heat, we had the, warm air is rising. We had very strong winds, 40-knot winds in this whole fire layer. So we have lots of energy. We have lots of wind. The fire got up in the treetops and was crowning. We have that worst case scenario of those really flammable needles. So this thing just got up and ran, which is what the fire behavior forecast said that morning. If there's a fire that can get in the trees today, it will take off, and all you can do is get people out of the way. Not a lot of detail, but an important piece if you're going to be planning for your fire day. So here's Minnesota, the Green Valley fire. A piece of information of planning was that all of our lakes are frozen. That was winter a week ago. So a pre-plan was our lakes are frozen. If there's going to be a fire, it's going to be bad. We need to have the National Guard on standby because their aircraft can fly far enough to an unfrozen lake further south and bring us water. Meanwhile, in Wisconsin, on the other side of the world in Wisconsin, about 200 kilometers away, fire started the same time, ultimately burned the same area, and burnt about the same number of structures and homes. So it created the great case study for me. However, there's a very big difference between these two fires, other than the whole idea of planning and preparation and risk perception, is this fire had a surprise. Right, that little cold front. So here's a satellite image. So this is kind of a visible look down. About 4 o'clock in the afternoon, if you were to use a satellite, look at the picture. We have some haze up here from some fires up there that don't matter for the stock. we have the Green Valley Fire, and we can see the smoke plume. I apologize you can't see it, but the smoke plume's going this way. And I don't know my little pointer. This is our biggest lake you can see on satellite. It's frozen over. Then you have this other fire. Both fires have been going for about an hour. This fire is in a different air mass ahead of the cold front, and the smoke plume's going the other way. Is there an unexpected wind shift coming? Or is there an not understood change of air mass coming? All right, so small pieces of information. You don't have to be 4 years meteorology and 15 years of looking at weather models to know clues that are out there that are telling you very important information for your fire operations. So we have a cold front. This is at 4 o'clock. It's important to realize the time. Not to mention 2 days ago I told them that this was going to happen. Okay, so now we jump ahead to 7 p.m. and this is a radar image. Do you remember on radar, or I'm sorry, on the clouds, there's no clouds over this whole area, right? It's that dry of an air mass that even though we have this cold air that's coming in, it's like a wall of cold air, it's very heavy and dense, it's pushing that warm air out of the way. I was working night shifts during this time, so I'm doing the early morning briefing, and I'm saying please put out warnings. So I go to bed, I wake up in the middle of the afternoon. First thing I do, because I'm a meteorologist, is I look at the radar, and I see this fire at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right when it started. At this time, there's clues on radar. So here's our fire, and here's our cold front. So if you're not familiar with how the radar works, very briefly, the radar sends out a burst of energy. It spends about 90% of its time listening for how much of that energy comes back. That is why the value is just energy. It's reflectivity. And the amount that comes back, that energy, is telling you basically how reflective and shiny something is that came back. So if you have hail balls and thunderstorms and melting hail covered in water, those values will be really high, and those are the big scary ones when you're watching thunderstorms. For fronts and fires, you can put that radar in a very sensitive mode and say, I'm not looking for hail balls that are coated in water or snowfall that's melting. I want to see a change in air mass. I want to see this front coming towards me. You can literally watch this wall of cold air, this complete change of energy barreling down on this fire, hours ahead of time. You also have a lake breeze just to compound this poor fire. That lake is just a few degrees above freezing because it's May. So you have about a 30-degree temperature difference between that lake breeze and the fire. Okay, and so here's my fire. So now let's just step through as we watch this fire. And again, very similar fuels to what you saw in the other photos. We just have our borealis forest, lots of pines. And it's burning, pretty well. It's 7 o'clock, 7:30 in the evening. So as far as intensity-wise, it's kind of met. It's peaked and come back down. So this is the instantaneous idea of what's happening when you basically let a bomb go off and your energy inside of your smoke plume is going along, and all of a sudden you've introduced now an acceleration, more oxygen, and in addition, you have that wind shift. That was forecasted. Okay, so here's a picture of what it looked like about 4 o'clock or so in the afternoon. You can see that it started down here in the kind of lower left. It's making its way up here. The response time, that initial attack, that critical moment might have been missed because we just weren't prepared and thinking about today is going to be a big fire day, and if we get a fire, it will be really bad. Here's photos right after that front went through. So it went from this to this unexpectedly. So my personal side of this story is that I could see hours ahead of time that this was going to happen. And I knew that they didn't know what it really meant for the fire behavior, right? So the idea that I was sitting basically at home for several hours, terrified, realizing that this is not understood. And what really happened was that this is a fire progression map that as time goes along, this is how much burned. Okay, we're getting into the evening, this is about sunset. Between 6:30 and 7:30, didn't burn a whole lot, making good progress. Fire behavior at this time, so it's going down. We let our guard down, the evening time. Where are all your crews at? Right, because the idea of the fire suppression is you go along the flanks, pinch off at the top. So visualize where everyone is, where instantly in 20 minutes this burns. Now there were no fatalities, there were traps, there were safety zones, there was some livestock that was in the way, but absolute chaos heading up to this. But the idea that the right message did not get to the right people at the right time, and I saw that as my failure. And I saw that this is something that everyone needs to hear and see, and that we can do better. Basically made my mission, which is why I quit. And this idea that you can have the same fire, and it can be a very bad fire. This can be a horrible fire day. This is indices off the chart. It's the train barreling down the tracks that we just have to stand back because we can't do anything, which is the Minnesota fire. But there was no after-action review. There was no one running for safety zones, right? It was just a bad fire that we understand and we were somewhat prepared for, but you weren't able to suppress it any different. It burned the same amount of land. Then in Wisconsin, you had another fire that caught people off guard, and it was a miracle that nobody died. And the one thing was that there was a change that was well forecasted, not just because it was me. It was a well forecasted, this is an obvious cases you're going to get, of weather information that is all there, and it's good, and this is how it is in Portugal. You have weather information, it's not getting to the right people in the right message. But you have people who can easily learn what to look for. And all they need to do is put on some binoculars, look at for these few things. They don't necessarily need to be meteorologists. So wrapping it up with, the wind shift was known. Oh yeah, we knew, but we just didn't know how to plan for it. And I read that and said, well, that's ridiculous, we can do better. Okay, one other case is, again, from my home area, one of the biggest fires that the state has seen, and actually one of the biggest fires in the entire country. It just doesn't get a lot of media because luckily nobody died. It took a big run on a day. It had been burning for a while. There's a small team on it. It took a little bit more of an expected run than people were prepared for. So the forecast to make the plan for the next day, which again I put together this forecast. I was not an incident meteorologist yet. This is what triggered my interest in fire. Was the weather forecast said, so on the fire line, big bad day, tomorrow, chance of thunderstorms. What does this mean for fire? Good, it's going to rain. There's a chance for rain and thunderstorms, but 40% chance of rain. What comes with the cold front? Cooler temperatures. Oh good, won't be as hot. What also comes with the cold front? High humidity. So if I'm looking from a fire perspective, I see chance of rain, cooler, and higher humidity. They sent crews home. The idea that that cold front was going to take an active fire and totally change the environment. This weather forecast is not for the fire. This is a weather forecast for some other end of the state. If you were to add fire to this weather forecast, you would see tons of energy, a huge wind shift, and if you have a chance for thunderstorms, things are going to go wrong. So this fire in orange is what burnt on this day. This is the biggest run of a fire in the nation's history. One day. And this is a big national wilderness area, so there's some cabins, but there's no cities here. If there would have been a city here, all of you would have known about this. There would be books written about it. And that's the only saving grace that why about this. So there were 8 personnel on the fire who were actually, their job was to go around to the various campsites of this wilderness area and tell people that there's a fire burning and they should start thinking about leaving because it should be there in a week or so. So this was only a few miles from my hometown, or for where I'm forecasting, literally forecasting an hour drive away from here. And we hear that this is happening, and I'm thinking in my mind, how is this disconnect so huge? And so actually this night they requested me to come. You guys have heard about the Granite Mountain hotshots? 19 firefighters died 5 years ago now. This was a wind shift. This was a wind shift from a gust front out of a thunderstorm. The National Weather Service office was watching this thunderstorm. They saw the gust front on radar. They issued the statement to the fire saying there is a gust front coming. It will be here at this time. The message was there. They couldn't find the crews and get them out in time. So, this happened 2 weeks ago. I'm here checking up on the news back home. What do I see? Unexpected wind shift. Firefighters need to run. So again, we have common problems, common solutions, and it's not that there's bad weather data, not that there's bad fire planning, but we're missing those interpreters who can say, what does that mean? And can I understand that if there's thunderstorms in the forecast, I need to know that there will be gust fronts in the area. Aircraft don't fly within 30 miles of a thunderstorm for a reason. Why we put people next to a fire in a thunderstorm is beyond me. So, those who don't study history and don't learn from our mistakes are doomed to repeat it. And that's apparently me in therapy in a few years. So wrapping this whole up and coming back around to why are these bridges important, right? And it does no good at all if you're the best forecaster and you have the perfect forecast and I can say the cold front's going to be here at this time if you don't understand how to then take that and put that into your planning and your response for your fire. So this is summing up basically why I've been here for the last 30 days. I've been putting on workshops to bring in all those entities of people who live on the other islands of all the bridges, trying to bring everyone together and say we can't build bridges unless we're speaking the same language, we know what each other is doing, we help each other out, we stop repeating all of the work we're all working on. So we did a week of that. People need to understand all of the tools that are out there to start working together. I also spent a few days taking fire personnel who already know all there is they need to know about local fire and saying, if you're going to be that person watching for those surprises, here's what you need to know. Give me a few hours and I can at least give you the tools. So we spent time doing that. We went around and visited all the various kind of entities. So we can't build bridges until we start understanding each other and having that common language, which is exactly what Trevor was talking about earlier, right? So I will wrap up with that and say thank you. Here's any of my contact information.